Hey guys, it's Cece, and today I want to talk to you about some monthly recommendations. Monthly Recommendations is a Goodreads group that was created by Trina from Between Chapters and Kay Lorraine from Kay Lorraine, and basically, each month, the Goodreads group gives a theme to all of us who participate, and we can choose as many books or as few books to recommend based on that theme, and this month's theme is survival stories. And this month is also Trina's birthday. I believe it was yesterday, so even though it will be belated, make sure to go wish her a happy birthday, go subscribe, and of course, happy birthday to Trina. So I have 8 books to recommend to you that are survival stories, so let's just jump right in. First of all, I'm going to start with male-centric survival stories, then female-centric, and then a mixed collection of main characters. So let's start with a male-centric survival story and talk about an obvious one, and that is Hatchet by Gary Paulsen. I say this is obvious because it is sort of, I feel like most people have read it already, and so it felt almost silly to recommend, but, you know, I just had to. A lot of people read this book when they're in like 6th or 7th grade, but it is just a really fun and suspenseful ride. Basically, it follows a boy named Brian when his plane crashes over the Canadian woods, and he has to survive completely on his own, and the only thing he has access to is a hatchet. It is suspenseful, it is super intense, and you never quite know where it's going to go. It's a fantastic survival story, one that I really highly recommend. I definitely want to reread it because it has been many years since I first read it. There is a series of books that follows it. A lot of them are like weird alternate universe versions of like if different things had happened in the first book. I read the second book, but it's just not nearly as good as the first one, so I would personally recommend just sticking to this first one and enjoying reading about Brian surviving. The next one that I want to recommend is Life of Pi by Yann Martel. And this is a survival story following a boy named Pi after he is in a shipwreck and he has to survive on the open ocean for many, many days with a Bengal tiger to keep him company. This has been turned into a movie that is beautiful to look at, but I personally think erases kind of the message at the end of the book, so take that as you will. This is beautifully written. It follows a journey of self-discovery. It can be very harrowing to read at times, but overall I think is a very beautiful book. The atmosphere is incredible, the writing style is just really, really beautiful to read, and I highly recommend this one as well. For my last male-centric survival story, I would like to recommend Peak by Roland Smith. I've never heard anyone on BookTube talk about Peak, so I think it's time for me to bring it up. It's kind of an older book that I read when I was much younger, and it follows this boy, Peak, who gets caught scaling the side of a New York City skyscraper, and he has 2 options. He can go to juvie, or he can go and live with his father in Thailand. But there is something more to the story. Apparently, Peak's father really wants to climb Mount Everest, and he would like Peak to go with him. And I know Peak is a silly name, but Dad's a mountain climber, so there are kind of reasons. This story is told in the form of a journal on Peak's journey to climb Mount Everest, and it is really intense. The character of Peak is really interesting, and overall it's just one that I remember really, really enjoying. It's a short book, so you can get through it really quickly, but it is a great story about climbing Mount Everest that I thought was really fun. And now on to some more girl-centric survival stories, starting out with Life as We Knew It by Susan Beth Pfeffer. I did a spoiler-free review of Life as We Knew It back in January if you would like to check that out, but basically it follows a girl named Miranda and her family when the moon is suddenly knocked closer to Earth and the world kind of is thrown into disaster. It follows this family when they are contained to their home for months and they're just not sure if the world is going to make it through this, or if they will make it through this either. This is actually also a story told through journals, and they are Miranda's journals, and it is so intense, and it feels unflinchingly realistic despite the fact that it is about the end of the world. I almost over-connected to the characters in the story, and overall it was an overwhelming experience, but a really, really well written one, and definitely a very intense survival story. There are more books in this series, but I decided that for me personally, because I reacted so emotionally to the first book that I didn't feel I could read the others, but I've heard that they're very good, so there you go, there's a whole series to this survival story as well. The next one I'm going to recommend is The Girl Who Loved Tom Gordon by Stephen King. This is a quick little book, but it basically follows a little girl named Trisha McFarland when she wanders off from her brother and her mother while they are hiking and gets lost in the woods. The only thing that she has to keep her company as she is lost for days in these woods is a portable radio, and she is a huge fan of baseball, so she listens to baseball on her radio and fantasizes about her hero, Tom Gordon, coming to save her. And additionally, it seems as though something more sinister may be tracking Trisha in the dark. This is one of the first Stephen King books I ever read, and I just thoroughly enjoyed it. It's a bit different from some of his other books that I read. I think it's scary, but not like overly scary. I think Trisha's interesting, and I think it's suspenseful and a wonderful, wonderful survival story. And the final girl-centric survival story I want to talk about is The Island of the Blue Dolphins by Scott Odell. I kind of can't believe that I've never talked about this book on my channel before, because for a lot of years it was one of my favorite books. This book is loosely based on a true story, but basically it follows this girl named Karana, who through a series of events has to survive on her own for many, many years on an island, just hoping that a ship will show up to come and save her. I wish I had my copy here because it is this beautiful old copy that's sort of falling apart, but it has these blue edges. It's gorgeous. I was obsessed with it when I was younger. I read it multiple times. I also listened to it on audiobook, which is one of the few times I've ever done that. The descriptions are so beautiful and captivating, and you really, really fall in love with the main character over the course of the story. I always remember feeling so emotionally attached to Karana. So if you're looking for an emotionally invested kind of story about survival, then this is definitely a great book for you. It is intended for younger audiences, but I think that it's one that can be enjoyed at any age because of the beautiful, beautiful writing. Okay, now I'm going to recommend two more, and these are each stories that follow both a boy and a girl or a general ensemble cast of survival characters. So yes, let's just get into these last two. The first one of those is Gone by Michael Grant. I know I talk about this series all the time, but I felt enough time had passed that I would be forgiven for mentioning it yet again. This book takes place in a small town in California on the coast, and one day, without warning, everyone over the age of 15 vanishes. And, as it is later discovered, the entire city limits is now contained within a dome, and no one can get out. And, a little bit more intense than that, children start to develop superpowers of a sort. Now, I know that I just said that all the characters were under 15, but I feel I have to say this every time. This is an incredibly dark book. Like, I couldn't believe how dark it got at times, and the series in general just gets darker. Each book adds something significant to the world of the Fays, which is what the kids name where they now live. And these powers get more and more disturbing and different and awful, and the things that happen to them are terrible, as they all kind of struggle to, some of them get along, some of them not get along in this world, and maybe survive. Because the most scary thing, in the first book at least, is that they have no idea what will happen when one of them actually turns 15. Will they vanish like everybody else? It's a fast-paced ride, it's well written, the series in general is fantastic and has one of the best series finale books that I've ever read, so I highly recommend this series, which is why I talk about it all the time. And the last one that I'm going to recommend is The City of Ember by Jeanne DuPrau. I don't think I've ever talked about this one on my channel before. It gets less attention, but I think it's actually a pretty good little book. Basically, it takes place in a world named Ember, and Ember is below the surface of the earth. And basically everyone fled there after some kind of serious event happened above ground, and now they've lived down there for a long, long time. But now their storerooms are starting to run dry, things are stopping working, and most terrifyingly, the lights of Ember are starting to go out, which could leave them in darkness forever. This is a fantastic book. There are 4 books technically in the series, but I would really only recommend reading the first 2. The third one is kind of a prequel. The fourth one is like only so-so. And I honestly think that the City of Ember had a pretty solid closing point anyway. I don't know that it needed to be a series at all. The main characters are super interesting and the world that is created is so fascinating. I haven't read this book for a few years now, and still I sometimes remember some of the visual imagery that was given to me in this series, because a world underground and the way that was described was amazing. So if you were looking for some people who have to survive beneath the surface of the earth, I would definitely recommend the City of Ember. Okay guys, there you go. Those are my monthly recommendations for survival stories. I did not mention The Martian in this video because I talk about The Martian constantly. The Martian is an excellent one, but I felt like I didn't need to cover my bases on it. So I hope you enjoyed watching. Let me know down below what your favorite survival story is, or if you've read any of these, what you thought about them. Make sure to go follow Trina and Kayla. They're both amazing and their channels are fantastic. And thank you so much for watching. I will see you in another video very soon. Bye!